Then they abandoned their nets and followed him. He walked along a little further and saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They too were in the boat, mending their nets. Then he called them. So they left their father Zebedee in the boat, along with the hired men, and followed him.
Sister Karen has prayerfully looked back over her life and has decided to divide it into 9 decades. She is now going to share with us the fruit of that prayerful reflection. You may want to go to sleep. When it gets too boring, just let me know. I just wanted to share a few reflections of things that happened, and I've kind of divided them in 2 ways. Originally, I was just going to go with the way God has touched me during these years. Then he said, you know, when you started out early, that's a lot of things people have even experienced. Maybe you should share some of those. So to begin with, being born in 1929, it was the year of the market crash. And so we grew up pretty poor. Everybody did. And it was difficult. It was a time where TB was very prevalent, and no one ever said the word out loud. They said, she has speed, and whispered it. I don't know whether they were afraid to catch it, or they were ashamed of it. But I never ever heard words out loud by anybody. She has. And the other one that we had at that time was polio.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of polio. My girl, 10 years ago, when we were 10 years old, she got it. It was paralyzed the rest of her life. My brother, when he was married, expecting his 3rd child, he got it. And fortunately, through prayer and grace, he was able to walk again, but it took, but his entire life he still had problems from it. Simple things like an ice cream cone was 5 cents. And I learned my first lesson, monetary lesson. I was maybe 5 years old. We were all in the corner waiting for the ice cream man because we had no freezers. Nobody could keep ice cream in their home. And the ice cream man gave ice cream to everybody except to me. And I went home in tears to my mother. And that was my story to her. The ice cream man gave everybody ice cream and you give me any. That's when I learned you had to have money for what you wanted. You had to buy it. So it was my first lesson learning that what you get in this world you pay for. We went to a Catholic school, and tuition was $5 a month. And even that was a difficult thing for people to pay at that time. But that's what we paid, $5 a month for Catholic tuition in school. But I have to say I had a very happy childhood in spite of the poverty, in spite of the difficulties that people, and worries that people were going through, the sicknesses around us. We had one hospital right near us, 5 floors, and the entire hospital was for people who had TB. The entire hospital. That's how prevalent it was at that time. But my mother shielded us, kids, from the worries that they had. But my home was permeated with my mother's faith. permeated my mother's faith. And the church and our parish meant everything to us. They were central to our lives. And it was just a wonderful thing to have that at the school. I had a half sister in every grade, for all 8 grades, plus the principal was a sister. We had processions every month. And I can remember when I was getting to an 8th grade, getting kind of tired of the processions, because we had to be in each month. But I realized afterwards how much they helped to form me in a lasting awareness of the Blessed Mother. And I think it was Mary's way of leading me to a religious community that draws its charism from Mary, who was pregnant with Jesus and became the inspiration of any outreach I've had over the years. So there's like a thread from the beginning of my life until now where I feel God has touched me, has led me, and I just rejoice in that. It just brings me so much joy to realize how close God has been with me all of my years. And one of the most amazing things for me was that in each of the classrooms in our grade school, there was a large picture in every class. Every class had a different picture. But the picture that was on the wall in the 8th grade was a picture of Jesus weeping over the people of Jerusalem. And that picture touched me deeply. It still touches me. And even during class subjects unrelated to religious education or to our religion class, I, even now, can remember how I felt drawn to that picture like a magnet. And it awakened within me a deep desire to reach out to God's people and to those that Jesus continues to weep over. It really formed my whole life, really. And it was the beginning, it was the stirring of my vocation as a religious, I know it was. But it was also colored all of my activities in life since then. That whole concept of being able to be sensitive and to God's people, to those that Jesus continues to weep over, and to offer comfort and consolation to Jesus in that meeting. It's a big part of my life. Now we come to the next decade, 39 to 49, the end of the World War, Second World War. I'm not paying on the Charlottetown, going downtown to celebrate. When I got down there, everything was so wild, I was scared to death. And I should get on the truck, looking off to get back home safe. But I didn't know where I was going. I was being dragged by the crowd, I couldn't even move. It was because I just couldn't forget what it was like. But during those years, I finished my grade school with the Dominicans. I had Dominicans all through grade school with the Dominican parish. I didn't know there was a class in priest until I was 18 years old. I just had the Dominicans. Anyway, I finished my grade school with the Dominicans and went to the high school with CMDs. I probably would have been a Dominican, except the 8th grade teacher I had when I got into high school with the CMDs, the 8th grade teacher called my house at least 3 times a week. Are you still coming to us? Until I couldn't take it anymore. I just couldn't. My father would say, the insurance lady's on the phone again. And when I got in with the CNDs, I realized that they were aware, maybe more aware than I was, that I had a vocation, but they didn't bug me. They were very present, very sensitive to me, but they didn't bug me. And so I gravitated toward the CNDs. I worked for the telephone company for a year before I entered, and then entered in 1948. There was no TV at that time, it was just beginning. And my brother took me over. At home, they put some black and white TVs in the windows in the bar rooms. And my brother took me to we stood on the sidewalk, and he brought me over to the bar room and let me look at, and I saw my first TV in the bar room window. And then so then we move into the next decade, and my first years of religious life were spent at Staten Island, the first 8 years. And we weren't allowed to watch TV. We weren't allowed to read any novels or books, newspapers. So I was totally isolated from everything that was going on in the world. We used to take the ferry from Staten Island over to Fordham for our classes. And when we were in the harbor, we often passed by this great big ship. I don't remember the name of it at this point. But just to show how isolated we were, one day, toward the end of the 8 years, I made my final vows in 1956, I guess, 58. And we were on the ferry, and I said to one of the sisters, I said it out loud. I said, whatever happened to that ship that I haven't seen that ship that we always used to see. And she said, shh. I said, what's the matter? She said, the ship sank a long time ago. But because we weren't exposed to the newspaper or TV, I never knew. And she was ashamed to have me say it out loud when everybody else in the world knew that the ship went down. But it was a stressful 8 years. It was a happy 8 years, a good 8 years, but a stressful 8 years, because it was a boarding school and we were with the kids 24/7. Learning to teach for the first time. Going to Fordham, I was taking 3 classes at Fordham. We had 1 set of books for 3 of us, and we lived in 3 different buildings. I remember going to the superior and saying, telling her how stressed I felt, and that I had to let go of something because I couldn't do it all and do a good job. And she said, I'll help you. She added down another course. I ended up with 4 courses in Fordham. Didn't really help. But I loved my years there, and it was hard to leave Staten Island. From there I went to Waterbury Catholic High for 3 years. And then in 1958, that was the summer I made my final vows. And we had the entire summer up in Montreal to prepare for that. And it was one of the most grace-filled times of my life, that summer of preparation. Very, very, very profound and special and grace-filled, and something I'm very, very grateful for. 5969. I went up to make my 8-day retreat that year, as we usually did. And when I got to that retreat, I don't remember the reason, but I remember thinking, I can't stay. I just can't do this retreat at this time. And I remember holding on to the chair till my knuckles were white. I've got to go home. I just can't. I don't know what was making me so stressed out, but I couldn't. I just thought, I cannot stay for this retreat. And I said, well, I'll stay overnight and I'll go home tomorrow. I stayed overnight. And I don't know what happened, but at that point, God took over. It ended up being the most powerful retreat of my life. And it was almost like, I think, sort of like a temptation. Like, if I had gone home, I would have missed out on some of the biggest graces I've ever had in my life. And that retreat carried me for a long, long time. And from that retreat, I was transferred unexpectedly out to the Midwest. I thought I had come to the end of the world out in the cornfields. I thought, what in the world is there out here besides corn? I just couldn't imagine what I was going to do out here. But all the stiffness and formality of New England didn't fit in the way, the warmth, and the informality of the people in the Midwest. And that began to rub off on me. And it was a big race. It was wonderful. I remember going home to visit my mother, and my mother said, I like where you are now. It was a wonderful spirit of the Midwest that had taken hold of me. And while I was out there, we were 32 sisters in the house. And I went through a painful event working with an alcohol priest. 32 of us, and he picked me to come on. And of course, we had silence today in the block, which would go until after breakfast the next morning. We had one telephone in the house for 32 of us, and it was in a telephone booth. This priest called me every single. I had never met an alcoholic, so I didn't even know. I thought if you want to stop drinking, you just stop. That's how I knew. Anyway, he called every night. And I would get down on the floor in the telephone booth because I knew it was sound of silence. But I didn't feel I could turn this priest away either. And he was very close to suicide. He had a loaded revolver in his bedroom. And I didn't know how to help this man. So I decided I would make a holy hour for him. And I made a holy hour every night before I went to bed to pray for him. I didn't know what else to do. And as we went through the year, unknown to me, the superior had told the sisters that none of them could talk to me about it, and I couldn't talk to any of them. So I needed to be able to get some of this out of my system and to share it. And I'd go to a friend, one of the sisters, and I'd go to say something to her, and she'd get up and walk away. I didn't know that Superior had told them that they couldn't communicate with me about this. So I carried the burden of it alone, not knowing how to deal with it, other than through prayer. and called guest house and said, would you please take this man, he's close to suicide. And their answer was, we have a long waiting list, we can't take him. He was only 32 years old. And so I finally said, you know, I went back to prayer again. Guest house called again. We're going to waive our waiting list. We'll take him. And they took him. Thanks be to God, they took him. He was there for a year. And he came, when he came back after a year, back to the parish, I was pulled out. They thought we were going to run off and get married. It was the last thing on my mind. Believe me, he would not have been the one. But anyway, he left the priesthood for 8 years, but then came back to the priesthood and spent the rest of his life working with all different kind of addicts, and did a lot of good work. He's dead now. But out of that experience for me, and I think that was one of the richest ones, was it took me beyond the sterility of a classroom of innocent children and gave me the ability and the grace to expand my ministries over the years with adults, which never would have happened, I think, if I hadn't had that experience with that priest. And then, that was the year of in that decade that my mother passed away. After that, I was sent in 69 to 79 up to Collinsville, somewhere here in Connecticut. Burlington, that whole area, I worked up in there. And that too was a big experience that was very meaningful to me. I had to give a talk to the parents for religious education. The first communion, we had about, it was a big parish, a big group. All of the high school children, I had about 800 in the class in the religious ed program. There were 2 of us who were in charge of it. All of the high school children met in groups in the homes, and about 12 kids to a house for religious ed. Sister Joanne Murphy and I prepared every single lesson that those teachers taught. They met with us, when 8th grade teachers would come in, we would prepare every lesson with them, and then we would go to those homes and sit in on those classes so that we could continue to assist them and help them until they felt secure enough in teaching. So that was a heavy program there, but it was very worthwhile. And when I had the first communion parents in, and I had about maybe close to 60 of them, young parents, maybe in their 30s with their youngest children, and I looked out to the people and I could see the men tapping their feet waiting to get out of there. I could see them like, how long do we have to listen to this? And after I gave the talk I had to give to them, to whatever content it was that they needed to know before the children made the first communion, I went down and I went to the group that I could see were the most irritated by being there. And I said, God had to give me the words, because they sure went on. And I said, why don't you people get a group together and feel the way you do? And I'll come, and I'll meet you, and it can be your own convenience, your own church. And so the first time I met church, can I really say this to you? I said, you can say it. And they began to empty themselves of the stuff that was, some of it misunderstood, some of it from anger, whatever. But they knew it was okay. And after those 4 months, the growth started. And I never asked any one of them to do anything. None of them not one of them were going to church. None of them were going to church. Except they had to have the children make their first communion. Get my little certificate, I'm safe, I did what I had to do. On their own, in those 5 years, all of them came back to the church. In those 5 years, all of them became involved in some ministry. I did not ask them to do that. One woman had scheduled an abortion. She canceled it and had her baby. The priest in the parish came to me. He said, I don't know what you're doing with these people, but he said, I've heard the best confessions I have ever heard in my life. So it was a grace-filled time for me, something I was scared to death to do. And the other thing was, when I went in at first, I thought I could go in with a program. But after listening to them in those 4 months, I realized